Chapter 2. The books of the Pentateuch and their contents. The name Pentateuch, according to the common Jewish arrangement, the Hebrew Old Testament consists of three parts called Law, Prophets, and Writings. The first of these consists of 5 books, sometimes called the 5 books of Moses. This group of books is called Torah or Law because it contains practically the entire legal system of the Jews. While the Law was originally a continuous whole, the fivefold division goes back to very early times. The early rabbis speak of the 5/5 of the Law, while the early church fathers, beginning with Tertullian, employed the term Pentateuch, which is still in common use among Christians. In the Greek name, pharaoh is used as an adjective. The noun biblios, book, is to be supplied to properly denote the box or chest in which the roll was kept, but in the course of time it came to be used of the roll itself. Simplicius, who translated the Old Testament into Greek during the latter part of the 2nd century AD, used it as the equivalent of the Hebrew word roll. The fivefold division. The 5 books in the Pentateuch are named by the Jews after the opening words of the several books. Thus, the book is called the beginning. The second, or Shemoth, or names, and these are the names. The third, and he called the fourth in wilderness, and he said the fifth. These are the words, or simply words. The names of the books in the English Bible are derived through the Latin translation of Jerome called the Vulgate from the early Greek translation known as the Septuagint and are meant to be descriptive of the contents. Genesis, generation, or origin, derived from Septuagint translation of Genesis 2:4a. Coming out, that is from Egypt, Levitical system, found chiefly in this book, Numbers, suggested by the numbering of the people recorded in the opening chapters. Deuteronomy, repetition of the law derived from 17:18, where the Septuagint translated erroneously this repetition of the law. The true meaning is a copy of this law. The fivefold division is due to the nature of the contents. Genesis clearly forms a book by itself, and so does Deuteronomy. Leviticus has characteristics of its own which separates it from the books on either side. This leaves Exodus and Numbers, the opening words of the former and the closing words of the latter, so that it is considered complete in itself. The Pentateuch. Modern scholars add to the 5 books of the Pentateuch the book of Joshua because its contents and still more its literary structure show that it is intimately connected with the Pentateuch and describes the final stage in the history of the origins of the Hebrew nation. Hence, it has become customary to speak of the first 6 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, as the Pentateuch. that is the six-roll book. That there is justification for this arrangement may be seen, for example, from this very simple consideration. The divine promise that the descendants of Abraham should occupy Canaan, repeatedly made in Genesis and never lost sight of in the following books, is shown only in the book of Joshua to have attained realization. The reason for separating the material in the book of Joshua from the Torah appears to be twofold. One, Moses could not be connected with this material as its author. Two, the contents made it possible to set it apart with the books of the Pentateuch as an authoritative rule of life. General contents of the Pentateuch. Though there is great variety of contents in the books of the Pentateuch, it is possible to arrange all of the material under two heads. 1. History. The historical portions of the Pentateuch cover the period beginning with the creation of the world and ending with the settlement of the 12 tribes in Israel in Canaan. The settlement of the 12 tribes of Israel in Canaan. This period may be divided into three epochs. 1. The beginning of all things, Genesis 1, 1 to 2, 9. 2. The Hebrew patriarchs, Genesis 2, 10 to 50, 26. And 3. The organization of Israel as a national unit and its settlement in Canaan. The historical sections of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and Joshua. Even in these so-called historical sections, no attempt is made to furnish a complete history. Many details important to the historian are treated briefly or passed over entirely. Nevertheless, the stream of narrative is never wholly interrupted, and though at times it is almost lost sight of, it always reappears and flows on to the end. Law. The legal element in the first 5 books is so prominent that, as has been stated, they are known as Torah, which means law. The book of Leviticus consists entirely of legal material. 2 others, Exodus and Numbers, are a mixture of law and history. Deuteronomy is made up of largely of address embodying laws, and even Genesis, which is chiefly narrative, mentions the laws of marriage and of the Sabbath as given in primeval times, gives regulations concerning food in the days of Noah, and regulates the institution of circumcision in the time of Abraham. The book of Genesis falls naturally into 2 parts. 1. The beginning of all things, 1 to 11, 9. Almost all ancient peoples sought answers to the question, whence came the world, whence came man, how did sin come into the world, how did different languages and nations arise, etc. General Genesis 1, 1 to 11 contains the answers of Hebrew religious thinkers to these questions. The chapters tell the creation of heaven and earth, man's original habitation, the entrance of sin into the world, the beginnings of civilization, and the growth of population, the spread of sin and wickedness, following the development of civilization was punished by a flood which destroyed the human race with the exception of one family. The descendants of this family repeopled the earth and gave rise to various nations and races. 2. The stories of the patriarchs. 2:10 to 50, 26. From the beginning of things in general, the book passes to the beginnings of the Hebrew people, in which the author is primarily interested. The Hebrews possess numerous characteristics common to the group of nations called the Semitic race. The racial relations of the Hebrew are briefly touched upon in 2:10 through 26, which traces the genealogy of Shem down to Abraham, whose migration from southern Babylonia to Canaan marks the first beginning of the Hebrew people. The rest of the book consists of narratives centering around the three patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and around Joseph, the favorite son of Jacob. The lives of these are narrated with considerable fullness down to the descent of the family of Jacob into Egypt, and with an account of which the book closes. The connecting bond throughout the chapters is the promise to Abraham and the covenant based upon it, the unfolding of which is exhibited in the lives of the patriarchs and in the rise of the 12 tribes. The successive steps in the development are connected, and the interest is concentrated by the use of the formula. These are the generations of Shem, Terah, Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Esau, Jacob, and Shem, 2nd, 10, 2:10, Abraham, 2:27, Ishmael, 25:12, Isaac, 25:19, and Esau, 36:1, 9, and Jacob, 37:2. The books of the Pentateuch, page 32. The beginning of all things, and that's 1:1 through 11:9. The creation of all things, the beginning of sin, early growth and corruption, the first murder, the earliest civilization, the line of Seth, the apostate sons of God, Noah and his times, the flood, Noah's prophecy, the origin of nations and languages, the gradual dispersion, the confusion of tongues, and that was up under 1, the beginning of all things. 2, the stories of the patriarchs. It says Abraham and Isaac, Abraham's ancestry, the genealogy of Shem, the genealogy of Terah, migrations of Abraham, Abraham's victory over the kings of the east, Yahweh's covenant with Abraham, birth of Ishmael, covenant of circumcision, destruction of Sodom, Abraham and Abimelech, birth of Isaac, proposed sacrifice to Isaac, death and burial of Sarah, marriage of Isaac and Rebekah, death of Abraham and Ishmael, and 2, Esau and Jacob and Esau, 1, 2, and 3, Jacob and Esau, Jacob and Laban, Jacob's return to Canaan, 3, Joseph and his brothers, Joseph's betrayal and exaltation in Egypt, the story of Tamar and Judah, reunion of Joseph and his brothers, this descent of family of Jacob into Egypt, and the blessing of Jacob. Now, in the Exodus, the closing chapters of Genesis record how the Hebrew nomads, after living in Canaan for several generations, were driven by famine into Egypt and were settled by Pharaoh of Egypt in Goshen, a district in the eastern portion of the Nile Delta. There they remained in practical seclusion for many generations. This period is passed over very briefly in the book of Exodus. In the course of time, a new dynasty ascended the throne of Egypt, under which a period of oppression set in, from which the Hebrews were delivered under the leadership of Moses. The opening verses of Exodus portray the experiences of the Hebrews during the closing years of stay in Egypt, and follows to 12:29 an account of the events leading up to their release from oppression. Chapters 12:30 to 19:2 contain a record of the departure from Egypt, the overthrow of the pursuing Egyptians, and the march of the Israelites until they reached Mount Sinai. The rest of the book, 19:3 to 40:38, relates some incidents during the encampment before Mount Sinai, but the greater portion is devoted to the giving of the law. 1. The oppression in Egypt. Excuse me. And y'all see what it's showing. I'm going to blow it up a little bit, but I'm not going to read all of that. Okay. The oppression in Egypt, the death of Joseph, increase of Israelites, forced labor, murder of male children, birth, adoption, and flight of Moses. 2 is the preparation for the deliverance, called to Moses to be the deliverer, Moses' return to Egypt, increased burdens. 4 is Yahweh's promise to Moses and Aaron, to the genealogy of Moses and Aaron, the plagues and the Pharaoh's stubbornness. 3 is the Exodus and the march to Mount Sinai. 1, institution of the Passover and departure from Egypt. 2, the Succoth to Elim through the Red Sea. 3, from Elim to Mount Sinai, quails and manna, war with Amalek, visit to Jethro, appointment of judges, arrival at Mount Sinai. 4, giving of the law, establishment of ratification of the covenant, preparation of the people, the Decalogue, the book of the covenant, prohibition of images, building of altars, laws concerning the protection of persons, laws concerning the protection of properties, miscellaneous laws connected with the civil and religious organization, blessings of obedience, ratification of the covenant, Moses' return to the mount. 2 is the instruction concerning the sanctuary and the priest, ark table of showbread, candlestick, curtain, framework, veil, screen, court altar of burnt offering, vestments of priest, ritual of consecration, altar of incense, maintenance of public service, laver, oil, incense, selection of Bezalel and Oholiab, Sabbath observance. 3, the apostasy and renewal of the covenant. 1, the golden calf and Yahweh's anger. 2, Moses' intercession and Yahweh's response. 3 is the renewal of the covenant. Now this is the execution of the directions in chapter 25 to 31. The Sabbath observance, contributions of the people, appointment of Bezalel and Oholiab, curtains, framework, veil, screen, ark table, showbread, candlestick, altar of incense, oil, incense, altar of burnt offering, laver, court, amount of metal used, vestments of priests, and delivery of completed work to Moses, erection of the tabernacle. Now Leviticus is the book. The book of Leviticus contains few passages cast in narrative form, and in these few cases, the narrative is introduced not so much for the purpose of describing the past as for the purpose of enforcing some provision for the future. The book is almost entirely a collection of laws, chiefly ceremonial or priestly in nature, hence its name Leviticus, which means the Levitical book. An even more appropriate title is found in the Talmud, Law of the Priest. 1. Laws concerning sacrifices and offerings. 1. Burnt offerings, meal offerings, peace offerings, sin offerings, guilt or trespass offerings, priestly functions in connection with these sacrifices, and other regulations. 2. Consecration of the priest, sin of Nadab and Abihu, Consecration of Aaron and his sons. Aaron offers sacrifices, sin and punishment of Nadab and Abihu, priestly duties and portions. 3. Laws concerning cleanliness and uncleanness. Clean and unclean animals. Uncleanness connected with childbirth. Various forms of leprosy. Uncleanness for sexual secretions and discharges. 4. The Day of Atonement. 5. The Law of the Holiness. Slaughter of animals, prohibition of eating of blood, prohibition of incest and other forms of impurity, religious and moral behavior, Moloch worship, unlawful marriage, and other offenses, regulations touching priests and offerings, festivals and sacred seasons, light of the sanctuary, showbread, blasphemy, sabbatical year, and year of jubilee, obedience and disobedience of their consequences. 6. Appendix, laws concerning vows, things devoted, and tithes. Numbers. The book of Numbers contains an account of Israel's wanderings from the encampment before Mount Sinai to the settlement in the region east of the Jordan. The opening chapters give census of the people who came out of Egypt. Following a long legal section comes the record of the wanderings during the period of extending from the second to the 40th year. The survey of Canaan, the refusal to enter the land, the march back to the wilderness, and various rebellions. The important events of the first 10 months of the 40th year are narrated in detail. The march around Edom, the death of Aaron, the conquest of the land of the Amorites and Bashan, the episode of Balaam, the sin of Baal Peor, the second census, the slaughter of the Midianites, the settlement east of the Jordan, interspread with the historical sections, are laws of various kinds. Now, this is describing what the books are and what they're about. I'm just trying to figure it out. Trying to pick out the babies. This is a lot of reading. This was sent to me by a viewer, and I should have just went with my first mind, honestly, letting whoever else read this and pick the babies out, because at this point I'm just reading. And honestly, I'm just going to go ahead and see if it's anything that catches my eye. I will not be continuing to read this because I am just reading. I have no idea what's going on. It's talking about the criticism of the book. I'll leave this for someone else to pick the babies out of. Peace and power. And I am done with this book for now.